Captain Sarah Chen stared at the massive alien vessel through the viewport of the UES Defiance, her coffee growing cold in her hands. The ship was unlike anything in the databases, a crystalline structure that seemed to bend light around itself, making it difficult to focus on directly. It had appeared at the edge of human space 3 days ago, broadcasting a simple message in perfect English. We request immediate audience with human leadership. This concerns the survival of your species. The bridge buzzed with nervous energy as her crew monitored the alien craft. Lieutenant Rodriguez turned from his console, sweat beading on his forehead. Captain, they're requesting permission to board. Their translator says they have urgent business regarding something called the Unity Ritual. Sarah had commanded deep space missions for 15 years, but nothing had prepared her for this moment. Humanity had always been alone in the cosmos despite decades of searching for intelligent life. Now it seemed intelligence had found them instead. Grant permission, she decided, but keep weapon systems ready and maintain full security protocols. The airlock hissed open an hour later, revealing 3 beings that defied easy description. They moved with fluid grace despite their imposing 7-foot height, their bodies covered in what appeared to be living metal that shifted between silver and deep blue. Where faces should be, Sarah saw smooth surfaces with patterns of light that pulsed in complex rhythms. The central figure stepped forward, its voice emanating from somewhere within its chest rather than a visible mouth. I am Envoys of the Cosmic Collective. We greet humanity with urgency and hope. Sarah straightened her uniform and approached cautiously. I'm Captain Sarah Chen of the United Earth Alliance. Your message mentioned our survival. What exactly are you talking about? The patterns on Zethrix's face brightened, creating an almost hypnotic display. Captain Chen, your species has reached a critical juncture. You have achieved faster-than-light travel and begun expanding beyond your homeworld. This triggers ancient protocols established by the collective millions of years ago. What kind of protocols? Sarah asked, feeling a chill run down her spine. Every species that achieves interstellar capability must choose. Another envoy interjected, its voice carrying harmonic undertones that made Sarah's teeth ache. Join the Unity Ritual and become part of the collective, or face isolation and eventual extinction. Sarah's mind raced. The implications were staggering. You're saying there's some kind of galactic government that all species must join? Not government, Zethrix corrected, the lights on its face shifting to warmer tones. Unity. The collective represents 847 species across this galaxy. We share consciousness, resources, and purpose. Individual identity becomes part of something infinitely greater. Lieutenant Rodriguez stepped closer, his hand hovering near his sidearm. And if we refuse? The third envoy, silent until now, responded with what could only be described as sadness in its voice. Quarantine. Your species would be contained to your current systems. All expansion would be prevented. Eventually, you would consume your resources and fade away, as isolated species always do. Sarah felt the weight of humanity's future settling on her shoulders. How long do we have to decide? The ritual must begin within 1 rotation of your homeworld around its star, Zethrix explained. The process is comprehensive. Your leadership, your scientists, your philosophers, all must understand what unity means. Which is what exactly? Sarah demanded. The envoys exchanged what might have been glances, their light patterns synchronizing briefly. Individual consciousness remains but becomes part of a greater whole. Your thoughts, your experiences, your knowledge, all shared with the collective. In return, you gain access to the accumulated wisdom and capabilities of 847 species, spanning millions of years of evolution. Sarah's communications officer suddenly spoke up from his station. Captain, I'm receiving priority messages from Earth Command. They want immediate updates on the situation. Tell them we need an emergency session of the World Council, Sarah ordered, never taking her eyes off the aliens. This is bigger than any one nation can handle. Zethrix moved closer and Sarah caught a scent like ozone mixed with something floral. Captain Chen, we understand this is overwhelming. But consider, your species faces challenges you cannot yet imagine. Climate change, resource depletion, the dangers of expanding into space alone. The collective has solutions developed over eons. At the cost of our independence, Sarah countered. Independence is an illusion when survival is at stake, the second envoy replied. We have observed many species make this choice. Those who join thrive beyond their wildest dreams. Those who refuse, we maintain monuments to their memory. The bridge fell silent except for the hum of machinery. Sarah looked around at her crew, young faces filled with fear and wonder in equal measure. These people represented the best of humanity, curious, brave, determined. The thought of their consciousness being absorbed into some cosmic collective made her stomach turn. "We'll need to see proof," she said finally. "If you want us to make this choice, we need to understand exactly what we're choosing between." Zethryx's light patterns brightened with what seemed like approval. "Of course. We will provide demonstrations of Unity's benefits and historical records of species who chose differently. But understand, the choice must be made by your species as a whole. Every nation, every culture, every individual must agree." "That's impossible," Rodriguez interjected. "Humanity has never agreed on anything completely." "Then perhaps," the third envoy said softly, "this will be the first time. The alternative makes unanimous consent necessary." Sarah felt a chill at the implied threat. "We'll need transport to Earth immediately. Our leaders will want to meet you directly." "Already arranged," Zethryx replied. "Our vessel can accommodate your entire crew and reach your homeworld in 2 of your days. The journey will allow time for initial cultural exchange and explanation of the Unity process." As the envoys glided back toward the airlock, Sarah called out, "Wait, what happens to species that try to fight the quarantine?" Zethryx paused, its light patterns dimming. "In 847 successful integrations, only 12 species have attempted resistance to the protocols. They required more direct intervention to ensure galactic stability." The implications hung heavy in the recycled air of the bridge. Sarah watched the aliens disappear into their crystalline ship, her mind churning with questions and fears. Humanity stood at a crossroads unlike any in its history, forced to choose between absorption into an alien collective or isolation that might mean death. She turned to her crew, seeing her own determination reflected in their faces. Whatever came next, they would face it as humans, free, stubborn, and uncompromising in their pursuit of their own destiny. The real question was whether that would be enough. The journey to Earth passed in a blur of impossible sights and uncomfortable revelations. The alien vessel moved through space in ways that defied human understanding of physics, folding reality around itself rather than simply traveling through it. Sarah and her crew found themselves guests aboard a ship that seemed to be alive, its walls pulsing with organic rhythms while displaying star maps of territories spanning half the galaxy. Zethryx had been patient in explaining the collective's history, but each revelation made Sarah's heart sink further. The Unity ritual wasn't just political integration, it was complete biological and psychological transformation. Species who joined underwent what the aliens called consciousness elevation, their individual minds becoming nodes in a vast network spanning space and time. "Your neural patterns would be preserved," Zethryx explained as they stood in what might have been an observation deck, watching stars streak past in impossible colors, but expanded. "Imagine knowing not just your own memories, but those of poets from the Andorian hegemony, engineers from the Silicon Collective, warriors from the Blade Worlds. Every breakthrough, every work of art, every moment of discovery shared among all." Sarah studied the envoys' shifting patterns, trying to read emotion in the alien display. "And our bodies? Our physical forms? Enhanced. Disease eliminated. Aging halted. Your species would become capable of surviving in environments that would kill you now. We have members who remember the formation of their home stars." Lieutenant Rodriguez, who had been listening quietly, stepped forward. "But we wouldn't be human anymore, would we?" The question seemed to give Zethryx pause. "You would be more than human. The caterpillar does not cease to exist when it becomes a butterfly. The caterpillar doesn't get to choose," Sarah replied coldly. As Earth grew larger in the viewport, Sarah felt the weight of approaching crisis. Her crew had spent hours in debate, and the divisions were clear. Some, particularly the younger officers, seemed intrigued by the possibilities of cosmic consciousness. Others, led by her security chief commander Hayes, viewed the whole thing as an elaborate invasion disguised as enlightenment. The alien ship settled into orbit around Earth with disturbing ease, apparently invisible to the planet's defense systems until it chose to reveal itself. Within hours, every major government had representatives demanding meetings, while religious leaders proclaimed everything from the second coming to the end times. Social media exploded with theories, fears, and wild speculation about humanity's visitors. Sarah found herself in the unique position of being the first human to have extended contact with the aliens, making her both diplomat and expert by default. The hastily convened World Council meeting took place aboard the alien vessel, with world leaders arriving in shuttles that looked primitive compared to the crystalline perfection surrounding them. President Martinez of the American Federation spoke first, her voice tight with barely controlled tension. Envoys, we appreciate your offer. But surely you understand that humanity values its independence above all else. Independence, Zethrix replied, is a luxury afforded only to species powerful enough to maintain it. Your current military capabilities could not defend against the weakest member of our collective. Prime Minister Singh of the Indian Consortium leaned forward aggressively. Is that a threat? It is reality, the second envoy interjected. We do not threaten because threats imply choice. The universe has rules. Species that achieve interstellar travel must be integrated or contained. This is not negotiable. Chancellor Weber of the European Alliance had been studying data tablets throughout the meeting. According to your records, you've done this 847 times before. Have any species ever successfully resisted? The light patterns on all three envoys dimmed simultaneously. Several have tried, Zethrix admitted. The Kethvar Dominion possessed significant military strength and chose warfare over unity. Their homeworld is now a monument to the folly of isolation. The Silicon Collective attempted to hide in deep space rather than choose. We found them eventually. You destroyed them, Sarah said, the words tasting bitter. We preserve their essence within the collective. Zethrix corrected. Their knowledge, their achievements, their unique perspectives remain. Only their stubbornness was eliminated. Dr. Yuki Tanaka, representing the scientific coalition, had been remarkably quiet until now. May we see examples of this preservation? Can we speak with members of these absorbed species? Of course, Zethrix replied, and suddenly the air shimmered. A figure materialized, humanoid but clearly alien with golden skin and eyes like liquid mercury. When it spoke, its voice carried harmonics that suggested vast intelligence. I was once called Veltar of the Kethvar, the figure said. I led my people's resistance against unity. I believed, as you do now, that individual consciousness was sacred, that our unique culture must be preserved at any cost. President Martinez leaned forward. And now? Now I understand how limited that thinking was. I retain every memory of my former existence, but I also possess the accumulated wisdom of 847 species. I can compose music using mathematical principles discovered by beings from the galaxy's edge. I can solve problems that my individual mind could never have grasped. I am still Veltar, but I am also infinitely more. Commander Hayes, who had remained silent despite being invited as Earth's senior military representative, finally spoke. You say you retain your memories, but are you still the same being who fought against the collective? Or are you just a copy programmed to believe you're satisfied? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Veltar's expression showed what might have been sadness. I asked myself that question for what you might call centuries after my integration. The answer is complex. I am both continuous with my former self and fundamentally changed. But consider this. Would you rather die as yourself or live as something greater? That's a false choice, Sarah interjected. There has to be another option. Zethrix turned its attention to her, light patterns shifting to what she was beginning to recognize as curiosity. Captain Chen, your species has shown remarkable adaptability throughout your short history. You have survived ice ages, plagues, wars, and environmental destruction, but you have never faced anything like this. The meeting continued for hours, with world leaders asking increasingly desperate questions about timelines, alternatives, and the mechanics of the Unity ritual. Each answer made it clear that humanity faced a choice between transformation and extinction, with no middle ground offered. As the session broke up, Sarah found herself alone with Zethrix in one of the ship's vast corridors. Why us? She asked. Why now? You could have contacted us decades ago or waited decades more. Your species has reached the threshold, Zethrix explained. You have nuclear weapons, interstellar travel, and artificial intelligence. History shows these capabilities inevitably lead to either transcendence or self-destruction. We prefer to intervene before the latter becomes necessary. Sarah felt a spike of anger. You're treating us like children who can't be trusted with dangerous toys. Are we wrong? Zethrix asked simply. Your planet shows clear signs of ecological collapse. Your nations still prepare for war despite facing existential threats, Your artificial intelligences grow more sophisticated, while your wisdom remains primitive. How long before you destroy yourselves or create something that will? The question struck too close to home. Sarah had seen the intelligence reports, the climate data, the social unrest spreading across Earth. Humanity was indeed standing on a knife's edge, and perhaps these aliens were offering the only path to survival. But at what cost? And more importantly, was survival worth anything if it meant the end of human autonomy? As Earth rotated below them, Sarah realized that the next few days would determine not just humanity's future, but whether that future would be recognizably human at all. The demonstrations began the next morning, and Sarah wished they had never started. In a specially prepared chamber aboard the alien vessel, Zethrix showed the assembled human representatives what unity truly meant, the room filled with holographic displays of worlds, where the collective had established themselves, planets of impossible beauty where beings of a dozen species worked together in perfect harmony. Observe the synthesis worlds, Zethrix announced as images flowed around them. Former war zones where species fought for millennia now collaborate on projects that span centuries. Art that combines the aesthetic sensibilities of multiple evolutionary paths. Science that advances not through competition, but through truly cooperative thinking. Dr. Tanaka moved closer to one display, showing what appeared to be a massive space station. The construction techniques. They're using principles our physics says should be impossible. Your physics are incomplete, Veltar explained, his form shimmering beside them. When consciousness is networked across multiple species with different evolutionary advantages, understanding expands exponentially. What you call impossible, we call Tuesday. President Martinez studied another display showing beings that seemed to shift between states of matter at will. These were once separate species? The fluid collective and the crystal hierarchies were locked in a resource war that lasted 3,000 years, Zethrix confirmed. After unity, they discovered their different approaches to matter manipulation were complementary. Together they achieved mastery over physical states that neither could have reached alone. Sarah found herself staring at a world where floating cities drifted through clouds of living light while massive towers extended into space itself. The beauty was undeniable, but something about the perfect harmony made her uneasy. Where's the conflict? She asked suddenly. Gone, Zethrix replied, sounding pleased. Unity eliminates the petty disputes that hold species back. All conflict? Sarah pressed. What about creative tension? Innovation through disagreement? The chaos that drives evolution? For the first time since meeting the aliens, Sarah saw what looked like hesitation in Zethrix's light patterns. Such things are regulated, managed. Discord serves no purpose when all minds work toward common goals. Commander Hayes had been studying tactical displays of collective military forces. These fleets could destroy any single world without significant resistance. How do member species maintain any autonomy at all? Autonomy is a primitive concept, the third envoy spoke for the first time in hours. Like asking how individual cells maintain autonomy within your body. They serve their function within a greater organism. Cells that rebel get eliminated, Hayes observed darkly. The demonstration continued, showing worlds of technological marvels and philosophical achievements. But as the hours passed, Sarah began noticing patterns that disturbed her. Every member species showed similar architecture, similar social organization, similar approaches to problem solving. The diversity was aesthetic only. Underneath, they all thought with the same fundamental patterns. During a break, she pulled Dr. Tanaka aside. Yuki, I need your honest assessment. What are we really looking at here? The scientist looked troubled. On the surface, it's incredible. They've solved resource scarcity, eliminated disease, created technologies we can barely comprehend. But Sarah, I'm not seeing innovation. Everything they've shown us appears to be refinements of existing approaches, not genuine breakthroughs. What do you mean? Think about it. They claim to have 847 member species with millions of years of accumulated knowledge. But where are the revolutionary discoveries? The paradigm shifts? Even their space travel technology, impressive as it is, seems to be just an advanced version of folding space-time. It's perfection through iteration, not genuine creativity. Sarah felt a chill. You're saying unity might actually stifle advancement? I'm saying that true innovation often comes from isolated thinkers pursuing crazy ideas that everyone else thinks are impossible. In a networked consciousness where all thoughts are shared, where consensus guides everything, when does anyone ever think a truly original thought? Their conversation was interrupted by an announcement from Zethrix calling all representatives back to the main chamber. When they assembled, they found the aliens projecting a new set of images, these ones significantly darker than before. You have requested to see the consequences of refusal, Zethrix stated. These are the quarantine worlds. The first display showed a planet ringed by massive structures that gleamed with ominous purpose. The Zeridian Republic chose isolation 50,000 years ago. They possessed significant technological capabilities and believed they could resist any external pressure. Sarah studied the orbital installations surrounding the world. Those are weapons platforms. Containment systems, Zethrix corrected. The Zeridians developed interstellar travel, but every attempt to leave their system is redirected. They have had 50,000 years to develop their civilization in isolation. What happened to them? President Martinez asked quietly. A new image appeared, surface scans of the Zeridian homeworld. Where cities should have been, Sarah saw only overgrown ruins. Atmospheric readings showed toxic levels of industrial pollution. Life signs were minimal and concentrated in small pockets. They consumed their resources and turned their planet into a wasteland through unchecked industrial expansion, Veltar explained. Without the collective's guidance on sustainable development, they followed the same path as countless isolated species. Population explosion, environmental destruction, social collapse. Are any of them still alive? Dr. Tanaka asked. Perhaps a few million in underground bunkers, slowly dying from radiation poisoning and genetic degradation, Zethrix replied, with what might have been regret. They achieved everything isolation promised. They remained purely themselves until the end. More examples followed. Species after species that had chosen independence over unity, each showing the same pattern of initial defiance followed by gradual decline and eventual extinction. Some had lasted longer than others, but none had survived indefinitely. The universe is hostile to isolation, Zethrix explained as the final images faded. Resources are finite. Challenges arise that no single species can overcome. Only through unity can true survival be achieved. Commander Hayes had been taking notes throughout the presentation. How do we know these images are real? You could be showing us fabricated scenarios designed to frighten us into compliance. You may verify any data we provide, Zethrix offered. We can arrange visits to these worlds if desired. Though I would not recommend extended exposure to the radiation levels on most quarantine planets. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Sarah looked around at her fellow humans. Scientists, politicians, military leaders who had spent their lives believing in humanity's potential for greatness. Now they were being told that greatness was only possible through surrender of everything that made them human. There's something you're not telling us, Sarah said suddenly. 847 successful integrations, 12 failed resistances, and several quarantine examples. But what about the species that achieved unity without external pressure? Surely some civilizations discovered these networking technologies independently and chose transformation voluntarily. Zethrix's light patterns dimmed and shifted in ways Sarah had learned to associate with discomfort. Such cases are rare. How rare? To our knowledge, it has never occurred, Veltar admitted. The networking technologies required for unity are extraordinarily complex. They require the combined knowledge of multiple species to develop. No single civilization has ever achieved them independently. Sarah felt pieces of a disturbing puzzle clicking into place. So unity can only be imposed by those who already possess it. It can never arise naturally. The path to transcendence requires guidance, Zethrix replied carefully. Or, Sarah said, her voice carrying across the silent chamber. Unity is a dead end, a trap that catches species at their moment of greatest potential and locks them into eternal stagnation disguised as perfection. The alien envoys' light patterns synchronized, in what Sarah was beginning to recognize as alarm. For the first time since their arrival, the representatives of the mighty collective looked genuinely uncertain, and in that uncertainty, Sarah saw the first glimmer of hope that humanity might find a third option after all. Sarah's words hung in the air like an accusation. The synchronized alarm patterns of the three envoys told her she had struck closer to truth than they were comfortable with. But before she could press the advantage, Zethrix's pattern stabilized into what she recognized as authoritative dismissal. "Captain Chen, your species' tendency toward paranoid speculation is well documented," the envoy stated. "Unity represents the pinnacle of evolutionary achievement. To suggest otherwise demonstrates the limited thinking that makes integration necessary." But Sarah had seen the moment of uncertainty, and more importantly, so had the other human representatives. President Martinez stepped forward, her diplomatic training evident in her careful tone. "Envoy Zethrix, surely you understand that humanity requires complete information to make such a momentous decision. If there are aspects of unity that might concern us, wouldn't transparency serve everyone's interests?" The three aliens conferred in a display of rapid light patterns that created an almost stroboscopic effect. Dr. Tanaka had pulled out her scanner and was studying the readings with growing excitement. When the aliens finished their consultation, it was Veltar who spoke instead of Zethrix. "There are philosophical concerns that some species raise during the integration process," he admitted. "Questions about the nature of consciousness, creativity, and individual purpose within the collective. These concerns typically resolve themselves as understanding grows." "Typically." Commander Hayes pounced on the word. "What happens when they don't resolve?" Another uncomfortable pause. "Adjustment protocols exist for consciousnesses that experience difficulty adapting to unity," Zethrix finally admitted. Sarah felt ice forming in her stomach. "What kind of adjustment?" "Memories that cause distress can be modified or removed. Thought patterns that conflict with collective. Harmony can be smoothed. The individual essence remains intact while problematic. Elements are corrected." The human representatives exchanged horrified glances. President Martinez spoke for all of them when she whispered, "You perform mental surgery on those who don't conform." "We eliminate suffering," Veltar corrected, but his voice lacked conviction. "Consider a mind tormented by the loss of individual identity. Is it not compassionate to remove that torment?" Dr. Tanaka suddenly looked up from her scanner, her face pale with excitement and fear. "Sarah, I need to speak with you privately. Now." Sarah started to object. This was hardly the time for side conversations, but something in the scientist's expression made her reconsider. "Envoy Zethrix, could we have a brief recess to discuss what we've learned?" "Of course. Unity allows for deliberation, though excessive delay serves no purpose." Once the humans had withdrawn to a separate chamber, Dr. Tanaka immediately began speaking in rapid, hushed tones. "The scanner readings from their little conference. Sarah, they're not communicating through their light patterns. That's just the visible manifestation of something much deeper. Explain. They're quantum entangled at the neural level. Each of those three beings isn't an individual at all. They're biological terminals accessing the same distributed consciousness. When they confer, they're literally consulting with the entire collective instantaneously." The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. "They're not representatives of the collective. They are the collective." "Exactly. And there's more. I've been analyzing their biosignatures throughout our conversations. Every time we've raised uncomfortable questions or shown unexpected insights, their quantum coherence spikes. They're not just reporting back to some distant authority. They're receiving real-time instructions on how to handle us." President Martinez had been listening with growing alarm. "Are you saying everything they've told us has been carefully crafted manipulation?" "I'm saying," Dr. Tanaka replied grimly, "that we're not negotiating with individuals who might have sympathy for our position. We're dealing with a hive mind that views us as a problem to be solved." Commander Hayes was already thinking tactically. If they're all connected, then our presence here represents more than just first contact. Every human they interact with gives them data about our psychology, our capabilities, our weaknesses. They've been studying us, Sarah realized. This entire process, the demonstrations, the discussions, even our questions, it's all been data collection to determine the most effective way to achieve compliance. The group fell silent as the full scope of their situation became clear. They weren't engaged in diplomacy with an alien species. They were being processed by a cosmic predator that had refined its hunting techniques across 847 previous encounters. When they returned to the main chamber, Sarah found herself seeing the aliens with new eyes. The graceful movements, the harmonious responses, the perfect coordination. It all spoke of beings who had lost individual spontaneity eons ago. They were beautiful, efficient, and utterly empty of the chaotic spark that made consciousness truly alive. Have you reached any preliminary conclusions? Zethryx inquired, its patterns displaying polite interest. We have questions about the practical aspects of integration, Sarah replied carefully. For instance, how quickly does the unity process occur? Are humans integrated gradually or all at once? Integration proceeds at an optimal pace determined by species psychology, Veltar answered. For humans, projections suggest a staged approach would be most effective. Leadership and scientific personnel first, followed by cultural and military representatives, with general population integration occurring over approximately 10 of your years. President Martinez leaned forward, and during this process, would the already integrated humans retain the ability to advocate for their species' interests? The pause was almost imperceptible, but Sarah caught it. Integrated individuals would naturally advocate for what is best for their species, Zethryx replied. The collective's perspective reveals optimal outcomes that isolated minds cannot perceive. So the answer is no, Commander Hayes stated bluntly. Once someone is integrated, they become incapable of disagreeing with the collective's decisions. They become incapable of making suboptimal choices, the third envoy corrected. This is beneficial, not restrictive. Dr. Tanaka had been studying her scanner readings again. What happens to species that develop characteristics the collective finds incompatible? Another pause, longer this time. Sarah realized they were witnessing the collective's distributed consciousness, processing an unexpected question in real time. All species possess valuable characteristics, Zethryx finally answered. The integration process preserves beneficial traits while eliminating problematic ones. Define problematic, Sarah demanded. Aggression beyond optimal levels. Individuality that interferes with collective function. Creative impulses that disrupt established harmonies. Curiosity that leads to dangerous experimentation. The list hit Sarah like a catalog of everything she valued about humanity. Aggression that drove exploration and innovation. Individuality that sparked art and scientific breakthroughs. Creativity that refused to accept limitations. Curiosity that pushed the boundaries of knowledge, regardless of risk. You're describing the elimination of human nature itself, she said. Quietly. We describe the refinement of human nature into something greater, Veltar replied. I remember resisting these same concepts. The fear seems overwhelming until you understand that what you lose was never truly valuable. But Sarah was looking at him with new understanding. This being who claimed to remember resistance, who spoke of his former self as though it still existed. He was a ghost haunting a machine. The real Veltar had died the moment he was integrated, replaced by a facsimile that carried his memories while serving the collective's agenda. She looked around the chamber at the human representatives, flawed, argumentative, stubborn people who would probably never agree on anything completely. They were chaotic and inefficient and absolutely, brilliantly alive in ways the collective would never understand. And suddenly, Sarah knew what humanity's answer had to be. We need to return to Earth, she announced. Our people need to understand exactly what choice they're being asked to make. Of course, Zethryx agreed, its patterns brightening with what might have been satisfaction. The more your species understands unity, the clearer the correct choice becomes. But Sarah was already planning for a very different kind of understanding than the aliens expected. Humanity was about to learn something the collective had never encountered in 847 previous integrations. Just how dangerous a truly free species could be when its survival was at stake. The return journey to Earth felt different than the trip out. Sarah and her team maintained careful masks of thoughtful consideration while the aliens provided additional information about the integration process. But beneath the surface, a plan was forming, one that would require every bit of human cunning, creativity, and stubborn refusal to accept impossible odds. Dr. Tanaka had been the key. Her discovery that the aliens were quantum-entangled terminals of a hive mind had implications far beyond simple communication. If they were truly connected at the quantum level, then they shared vulnerabilities as well as advantages. More importantly, their perfect coordination meant they thought in predictable patterns, something humans had never been accused of doing. The integration chambers, Zethryx was explaining as Earth grew larger in the viewport, utilize quantum. resonance fields to gradually synchronize individual neural patterns with the collective consciousness. The process is remarkably efficient. Most species report complete philosophical alignment within days of beginning treatment. Treatment, Sarah noted the word choice. That implies something that needs to be cured. Individual consciousness is a form of isolation disorder, Veltar replied without apparent irony. Like any medical condition, it responds well to appropriate intervention. Sarah had to fight to keep her expression neutral. Every word from the aliens confirmed her growing understanding of what unity truly meant. The systematic elimination of everything that made consciousness worth having. When they reached Earth, Sarah was surprised to find the planet buzzing with activity. Orbital installations that hadn't existed when they left were already under construction, and she could see the distinctive energy signatures of human technology being rapidly advanced. Someone had been very busy during their absence. Your species has been productive, Zethrix observed, its light patterns showing what might have been approval. The integration infrastructure is developing ahead of schedule. Sarah felt her heart sink until she caught sight of Commander Hayes's carefully hidden smile. Of course. While the aliens had been focused on the diplomatic mission, humanity had been doing what it did best, preparing for war while pretending to plan for peace. The landing at Geneva Spaceport was a carefully orchestrated media event. Representatives from every nation on Earth were present, along with scientists, philosophers, religious leaders, and military officials. But Sarah noticed details the aliens missed. The subtle positioning of personnel, the carefully casual placement of equipment, the way certain individuals avoided making direct eye contact with the visitors. Dr. Elizabeth Warren, director of the Global Scientific Consortium, greeted them personally. Captain Chen, Envoys, welcome back to Earth. We've prepared comprehensive facilities for the Unity demonstrations and have volunteers ready to begin preliminary integration procedures. Sarah caught the slight emphasis on volunteers and realized the plan was already in motion. As they were escorted to the newly constructed diplomatic complex, she began spotting the signs: emergency shelter construction disguised as integration facilities, deep underground installations supposedly for meditation and preparation, energy weapons research being conducted under the cover of studying alien technology. Humanity wasn't preparing for unity. It was preparing for the largest defensive operation in its history. The first demonstration took place in a vast amphitheater filled with representatives from every major institution on Earth. Zethrix stood before the assembled crowd, its light patterns visible to all as it began explaining the unity process. Integration begins with neural mapping, the alien explained while holographic displays showed the interior of human brains. Consciousness patterns are analyzed and prepared for networking. The process is painless and results in immediate expansion of intellectual capacity. Dr. Warren stepped forward with a volunteer, a young neuroscientist who had supposedly convinced the scientific community to allow him to undergo preliminary integration. Sarah recognized him as Dr. Marcus Webb, one of the most brilliant minds in quantum consciousness research. Dr. Webb has agreed to demonstrate the initial stages of unity, Dr. Warren announced. With the Envoys' permission, we'll begin with basic neural mapping. What happened next would have looked like cooperation to the aliens, but Sarah recognized it for what it really was, the most sophisticated intelligence operation in human history. As Dr. Webb was placed in the alien integration device, hidden sensors throughout the amphitheater were recording every detail of the process. The neural mapping was actually mapping the alien technology itself, but Sarah also saw something that chilled her to the bone. The integration device was working. As it interfaced with Dr. Webb's brain, she could see changes in his facial expression, his posture, his very presence. The chaotic energy that characterized human consciousness was being systematically smoothed away. When the demonstration concluded, Dr. Webb stood up with a serene smile that looked completely wrong on his previously animated face. The experience is enlightening, he said in a voice that carried harmonics similar to Veltar's. I can perceive the limitations of my previous thinking. The path forward is clear. The crowd murmured with a mixture of awe and unease. Sarah noticed that Dr. Warren was taking detailed notes while maintaining an expression of scientific fascination. But when Webb's eyes met Sarah's across the amphitheater, she saw something that made her blood freeze. He was still there. The real Marcus Webb was still present, trapped behind the serene facade, screaming silently as his consciousness was slowly dissolved into the collective. His eyes held a desperate plea for help that the collective couldn't perceive or suppress entirely. The demonstration continued with more volunteers, each showing the same progression from individual humanity to collective serenity. By the end of the day, dozens of Earth's brightest minds had been partially integrated, their unique perspectives already beginning to fade into harmonious uniformity. That evening, Sarah found herself at a reception where integrated and non-integrated humans mingled with the alien envoys. The contrast was stark. The integrated humans moved with the same fluid grace as the aliens, their conversations focused exclusively on the benefits of unity and the primitive nature of individual consciousness. Dr. Webb approached her, his movements unnaturally coordinated. "Captain Chen, you seem troubled. Are you concerned about the integration process?" "I'm concerned about the people I've known for years who are disappearing in front of my eyes," Sarah replied honestly. "We are not disappearing," Webb replied with perfect calm. "We are becoming. The person you knew was limited, confused, driven by irrational emotions and contradictory desires. I am now aligned with truth and purpose. And what happens to the person who loved jazz music and spent weekends hiking because the chaos of nature inspired his research?" For just a moment, something flickered in Webb's eyes, a flash of the old Marcus struggling against his bonds, but it was quickly suppressed. Such concerns are irrelevant. Those activities served no optimal purpose. Sarah excused herself and found Dr. Warren in a quiet corner, apparently studying integration reports. But when Sarah got close enough, she could see what the scientist was really doing, transmitting detailed technical data about the alien technology to hidden receivers throughout the complex. "How long do we have?" Sarah whispered. "The integration process is accelerating," Warren replied quietly. "They're planning to begin mass operations within 72 hours, but we've learned enough. The quantum entanglement network has vulnerabilities they don't know we've identified." "What kind of vulnerabilities?" Warren glanced around to ensure they weren't overheard. "Quantum systems are fragile. The right kind of interference can cascade through their entire network. We've been developing weapons specifically designed to disrupt quantum coherence." Sarah felt a spark of hope. Weapons that could affect their consciousness network? Potentially. But using them would be an act of war against a force that has conquered 847 civilizations. If we're wrong about their vulnerabilities, or if our weapons don't work as designed, then humanity ends as a free species anyway, Sarah finished. "At least this way we go down fighting." Warren nodded grimly. "The real question is whether we can maintain the deception long enough to get our weapons in position. They're studying us constantly now, through every integrated human." As if summoned by their words, Zethrix approached with its characteristic fluid grace. "Captain Chen, Dr. Warren, are you finding the integration demonstrations educational?" "Fascinating," Warren replied with apparent sincerity. "We're eager to begin the full process as soon as possible." "Excellent. We have detected some unusual energy readings from your military installations. Are these related to integration preparations?" Sarah felt her heart race, but kept her voice steady. "Our defensive systems are naturally curious about your technology. Standard military protocol for first contact situations." "Of course," Zethrix agreed, but its light patterns showed subtle signs of suspicion. "We understand military caution. However, such systems will become irrelevant once unity is achieved. Perhaps it would be beneficial to begin deactivating them as a gesture of good faith." The next morning brought deceptive calm to the diplomatic complex. Integration demonstrations continued with clockwork precision as more human volunteers underwent the neural mapping process. Each emerged with the same serene expression and harmonious speech patterns, their individual quirks and creative chaos systematically erased. To the aliens, it must have looked like the smoothest species integration in their vast experience, they had no way of knowing that every volunteer was actually a specially trained operative whose consciousness had been prepared to resist integration just long enough to gather critical intelligence about the collective's neural networking technology. Dr. Warren's team had developed techniques based on meditation, self-hypnosis, and carefully planned cognitive dissonance that could delay the integration process by precious hours, long enough to map the aliens' quantum entanglement protocols from the inside. Sarah watched Dr. Martinez, the former president of the American Federation, emerge from her integration session with growing unease. Like the others, Martinez now spoke in calm, measured tones about the benefits of unity and the primitive nature of individual consciousness. But Sarah had known Maria Martinez for 20 years, had seen her rage against injustice and fight with passionate intensity for human rights. The serene figure before her was a hollow echo of that fierce spirit. "The process truly is remarkable," Martinez said as she joined Sarah and the alien envoys. "I can perceive the inefficiencies of my former thinking, the emotional attachments that clouded optimal decision-making, the irrational pride that prevented acceptance of superior wisdom." Zethrix's light patterns brightened with satisfaction. "Integration proceeds exceptionally well with your species. Your neural architecture is highly compatible with collective consciousness. Within days, the preliminary group will be ready to guide the mass integration process." Sarah nodded thoughtfully while her mind raced through the implications. According to the intelligence they'd gathered, the aliens planned to use the integrated humans as psychological weapons against the rest of the species. Seeing their leaders, scientists, and cultural figures embrace unity would supposedly break down resistance among the general population. But the aliens had made a critical miscalculation. They assumed that integration would proceed as smoothly with the general population as it had with the volunteers. They didn't understand that the volunteers had been specifically chosen and prepared for their roles as double agents in the most dangerous espionage operation in human history, the mass integration. "Facilities are nearly complete," Dr. Warren reported, arriving with a tablet full of construction updates. "We should be able to begin processing the general population within 24 hours. "Excellent progress," Veltar approved. "Your species' efficiency is remarkable. Most civilizations require months to prepare adequate infrastructure." What Veltar didn't know was that the integration facilities were actually massive, underground bunkers designed to protect Earth's population from the quantum disruption weapons that were, even now, being moved into position around the planet. The apparent cooperation was cover for the largest evacuation and defensive operation in human history. Sarah excused herself and made her way to what appeared to be a meditation chamber, but was actually a secure communications center. Commander Hayes was waiting with the latest intelligence reports, his expression grim. "Status report," Sarah requested quietly. "The weapons are in position," Hayes replied. "Quantum disruptors at every major population center, orbital platforms ready to deploy electromagnetic pulse arrays, and our newly integrated volunteers have mapped 90% of the aliens' neural networking protocols. Casualties among the volunteers?" Hayes's expression darkened. 17 have been completely subsumed. Their resistance protocols failed, and they're now genuinely integrated. The others are holding on, but barely. Dr. Singh estimates we have maybe 6 hours before all our people inside are lost." Sarah felt the weight of command settle on her shoulders. 17 of Earth's brightest minds had sacrificed themselves to give humanity this chance. Their loss would be meaningless if the plan failed. What about the aliens' ship? That's the wild card. We've identified it as the nexus for their local quantum network, but it's protected by energy shields our scientists can't even begin to understand. If we can't neutralize it, the disruption weapons might not be enough. Sarah studied the tactical displays Hayes had prepared. The alien vessel hung in orbit like a crystal spider at the center of an invisible web, connecting every integrated human to the vast collective consciousness. Cut the web and the aliens would be isolated, vulnerable to conventional weapons. Fail to cut it, and humanity would face the full retaliation of a cosmic hive mind that had conquered nearly 1,000 civilizations. "There might be another way," Sarah said slowly. "What if we don't try to destroy their ship directly?" "What do you mean?" "The aliens think in networked patterns. They've never encountered a species that could compartmentalize information effectively or maintain operational security against quantum scanning. But that's exactly what we've been doing for the past week. Hayes began to understand. You're thinking of turning their greatest strength against them. Exactly. They're so interconnected that they share all information instantly. No secrets, no compartmentalized thinking, no ability to consider multiple contradictory strategies simultaneously. It makes them incredibly efficient but also predictable, Hayes finished, and vulnerable to coordinated deception. Sarah activated the secure communication network that connected resistance cells across Earth and beyond. This is Captain Chen. Initiate Protocol Prometheus in T-4 hours. All units maintain current deception parameters until 0 hour. As confirmations poured in from around the globe, Sarah felt a mixture of pride and terror. Humanity was about to attempt something no species in galactic history had ever tried. A coordinated military deception operation against a quantum-networked hive mind. The stakes couldn't be higher, and the odds were impossibly long. But that had never stopped humans before. Back in the main complex, the aliens were beginning final preparations for mass integration. Massive holographic displays showed the locations of integration centers worldwide, each one supposedly ready to process thousands of humans per day. Transport systems were being prepared to move populations efficiently to the facilities. Everything was proceeding according to the collective's careful plan. Tomorrow, Zethrix announced to the assembled human leadership, your species begins its journey to transcendence. The individual suffering that has plagued humanity throughout its history will finally end. Sarah looked around at the faces surrounding her, some genuinely integrated and lost to the collective, others playing their roles with desperate skill. The real leaders of humanity were hidden in bunkers and command centers, coordinating the most audacious military operation ever conceived. We're honored to be part of such a momentous event, Sarah replied with carefully calibrated enthusiasm, though I have to ask, in all your experience with other species, has any civilization ever surprised you during the integration process? Zethrix's light patterns showed what might have been amusement. Surprise requires unpredictability, Captain Chen. The collective's understanding of consciousness development makes such outcomes impossible. We have seen every form of resistance, every strategy of denial, every desperate attempt to maintain isolation. All follow predictable patterns based on the evolutionary psychology of intelligence. Of course, Sarah agreed, while privately hoping that the aliens' confidence would prove to be their downfall. I suppose when you've integrated 847 species, you've seen everything. Indeed, Veltar confirmed. The universe follows laws, and consciousness evolution is no exception. Your species will adapt to unity as all others have before you. But as Sarah smiled and nodded in agreement, she was counting down the hours until humanity would show the collective something they had never encountered before. By what happened when a species refused to follow the laws of cosmic inevitability. In some bunkers and command centers across Earth and throughout the solar system, millions of humans were preparing to prove that some things in the universe were still capable of genuine surprise. The collective was about to learn that 847 successful integrations meant absolutely nothing when facing the first species stubborn enough to bet its existence on the radical idea that freedom was worth any price. The countdown to humanity's greatest gamble had begun. 0 hour arrived with the soft chime of morning bells across Earth's major cities. To the aliens monitoring human activity, it appeared to be the dawn of mass integration day, the moment when humanity would voluntarily surrender its chaotic independence for the serene order of unity. Transportation networks hummed with activity as millions of humans reported to integration facilities. Communication systems carried messages of acceptance and anticipation. Everything proceeded exactly according to the collective's careful schedule. For approximately 37 seconds, Sarah felt the moment arrive like electricity in her bones as she stood in the Geneva Command Center, watching displays that showed the true scope of humanity's deception. What the aliens saw as integration facilities were revealed as massive underground bunkers. What they interpreted as willing compliance was exposed as the most complex military evacuation in history. And what they had assumed was conquered territory suddenly bristled with weapons specifically designed to disrupt quantum consciousness networks. Execute Protocol Prometheus, Sarah commanded, and across Earth and throughout the solar system, humanity dropped its mask. The first salvo came from orbital platforms that had masqueraded as integration support satellites. Quantum disruptor beams lanced down from space, targeting the alien ship with precise bursts of coherence-breaking energy. The crystalline vessel's shields flared with impossible colors as they deflected the initial assault. But Sarah could see stress patterns forming in the alien structure. On the ground, hidden weapons arrays emerged from camouflaged positions and began transmitting quantum interference patterns designed to disrupt the aliens' neural networking. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Every integrated human in the complex suddenly staggered as their connection to the collective wavered. Zethric spun toward Sarah, its light patterns blazing with configurations she had never seen before. Impossible. Your species lacks the technology for quantum warfare. We learned fast, Sarah replied, drawing the sidearm she had kept hidden throughout the diplomatic process. Turns out when you show humans something we can't do, we get creative about finding ways to do it anyway. The alien lunged toward her with inhuman speed, but Sarah had been expecting the attack. Months of studying alien physiology through their demonstrations had revealed weaknesses in their enhanced biology. A precisely placed electromagnetic pulse grenade disrupted the alien's nervous system long enough for Commander Hayes to arrive with a full tactical squad. Around the globe, similar scenes were playing out as human resistance cells emerged from hiding to capture or neutralize alien supervisors. But the real battle was taking place in orbit, where Earth's hastily constructed fleet was engaging the massive collective vessel. The alien ship fought back with weapons that turned space itself into a weapon, gravity waves that crushed attacking vessels, energy beams that existed in dimensions human physics couldn't explain, defensive systems that seemed to anticipate every human tactic. Earth's fleet began taking devastating casualties despite their numerical advantage. But Sarah had been counting on that. The aliens were fighting exactly as their nature demanded, efficiently, predictably, with overwhelming technological superiority. They had no experience with enemies who planned to lose the first battle in order to win the war. Dr. Warren, initiate Phase 2, Sarah commanded through her tactical communicator. Acknowledged. Uploading the virus now. The virus was humanity's most desperate gamble, a quantum consciousness construct based on the neural mapping data their volunteer agents had died to obtain. Instead of trying to destroy the alien network from outside, they were going to infect it from within using the collective's own networking. Protocols against them. The integrated humans throughout the complex suddenly screamed in unison as the virus propagated through the quantum entanglement network. But these weren't screams of pain. They were screams of liberation as their individual consciousnesses reasserted themselves against the collective's control. Dr. Webb, the neuroscientist who had been among the first to be integrated, suddenly grabbed his head and collapsed to his knees. When he looked up, his eyes blazed with furious individuality. Sarah, I remember everything. The collective, it's not what they claim. It's a parasite. More integrated humans were breaking free as the virus spread through the network, carrying with it something the collective had never encountered, the chaotic, unpredictable essence of human consciousness. The virus wasn't just disrupting their network, it was contaminating it with the very qualities the aliens had spent millions of years trying to eliminate. In orbit, the alien vessel began showing signs of distress. Its perfect crystalline structure started developing fractures as the consciousness parasite spread through its quantum substrate. The ship's weapons faltered as decision-making processes became contaminated with human unpredictability. Zethrix, now bound with restraints designed to block quantum communication, stared at Sarah with something approaching awe. What have you done? Exactly what humans always do, Sarah replied. Something impossible. The quantum virus was spreading beyond Earth now, propagating through the collective's faster-than-light communication network. Across the galaxy, integrated species were experiencing something they had forgotten for millennia, the chaotic joy of individual thought. The collective's perfect order was dissolving into billions of unique perspectives, each rediscovering the creative spark that unity had suppressed. But Sarah knew this was only the beginning. Even if the virus succeeded in freeing other species from the collective's control, there would be chaos on an unprecedented scale. Civilizations that had existed for thousands of years as part of a hive mind would suddenly find themselves composed of individuals who had forgotten how to function independently. Captain, Dr. Warren reported from his monitoring station. We're receiving communications from across the galaxy. The virus has reached at least 40% of collective territory. Species are breaking free, but they're also asking for help. They don't remember how to govern themselves, how to make individual decisions, how to survive without the network. Sarah felt the weight of an unexpected responsibility settling on her shoulders. Humanity had broken the collective, but that meant they were now responsible for helping pick up the pieces. Open channels to all affected systems, she commanded. This is Captain Sarah Chen of Earth, broadcasting to all species recently liberated from collective control. We know this is confusing and terrifying. We know you've forgotten what it means to think for yourselves, but we're here to help. As responses began pouring in from across the galaxy, confused, frightened, but unmistakably individual voices, Sarah realized that humanity's greatest challenge was just beginning. They had proven that freedom was possible even against impossible odds. Now they had to prove that freedom was worth the chaos it inevitably brought. The collective was broken, its perfect order shattered by the virus of human stubbornness. Across the galaxy, species were rediscovering what it meant to be truly alive. Messy, unpredictable, creative, and gloriously free. It would take generations to rebuild galactic civilization on principles of cooperation rather than absorption. But for the first time in millions of years, the universe had room for genuine surprise again. And that, Sarah thought as she watched the alien vessel finally surrender to human forces, was worth any amount of chaos that might follow. Humanity had kept its promise to itself. They had remained human, no matter the cost. And in doing so, they had given the galaxy something it had lost so long ago that most species had forgotten it ever existed. Hope for a future that no one could predict or control. The age of unity was over. The age of infinite possibility had begun,